Unless you're 100 years old, you've never been through anything like this COVID-19 pandemic before. And if we're being honest, we're more than ready for it to be over. The story is everywhere, on all of our media, part of our daily conversations, and of course, defining so much of what we now do and don't do. Would you like some advice on how to handle your fed up feelings? If so, listen in Costa Mesa, California, to Dana Rose Garfin. She is disaster and trauma researcher at the University of California, Irvine. In Lanark Highlands in Eastern Ontario, Gordon Flett, psychology professor and Canada Research Chair in Personality and Health at York University. And in the provincial capital, Ramona Pringle, associate professor at Ryerson University's RTA School of Media and the director of the Creative Innovation Studio. And it's great to have you three with us this morning. I should say this
Great to be
evening.
here.
Boy, this pandemic is getting to me. Okay, Gordon, let's start with you. It's 2 months now since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. What do you think have been some of the biggest challenges for people's mental health during this 2-month period?
Oh, there's a variety of challenges, Steve. The isolation, the disruption to daily life is an especially important element to it. Things just aren't the way they used to. When you hear people say they're feeling depressed, they often say, I'm not my usual self. Well, nothing is usual right now, including the self. All kinds of stress, and that could be magnified by people's individual situations as well. But basically, we're talking about uncertainty, isolation, and potentially totally unique circumstances where people are having their daily lives disrupted.
Not too long ago, we had a pollster named Erin Kelly on the program. She runs a company called Advanced Symbolics in the nation's capital, our nation's capital, and she uses artificial intelligence so that she can track social media as well as traditional polling methods. And we asked her whether people were feeling saturated with the coverage, the constant 24/7 coverage in the media of this situation. And let's just play a little clip of what she had to say, and then we'll come back and chat. Chad, if you would, roll that clip.
People are tired of that story. It's not so much that they're tired of COVID necessarily, but I think people want to hear, they don't just want to hear daily death counts. They want to hear, what do we need to see to get things back to normal? Is it possible? Is it possible? How does the phased approach look? How can we get this back? People want to hear about testing. They want to hear other stories, and they do want to hear about things other than COVID as well. But if we are going to keep talking about COVID, we need to change the mix a little bit.
Dana, what's your view on that?
My view is that people, we know from disaster psychology and other research on different types of disasters that this repeated exposure to media tends to be bad for people's physical as well as mental health. So I do think people need to find a way to kind of turn off the TV and shift towards a different activity so that they're not constantly exposed to that same information over and over again.
Ramona, could you react to those findings as well?
Absolutely. I think the challenge is that we are all living inside our homes, and our only exposure to the outside world in great part is through our screens, and our screens are full of media about COVID, about this pandemic, and it's very hard to escape from. And it's hard to tell, for members of the media, it's hard to tell other stories because everything is tied to this. Our personal lives, our economy, entertainment, every single aspect of our lives, it's ubiquitous, it's touched everyone. And so it's hard to escape from. And it really becomes a matter of, if you are going to try and step away from that messaging, it's sort of a waterfall, it's a faucet. I was reading someone talk about it as a faucet the other day, where you really just need to turn it off entirely. So it's a challenge in that, in many ways, at least up to now, it's been hard to talk about anything else. It's hard to find anything else that seems relevant to talk about. I do a weekly tech column, and to think about any story that wasn't related to the pandemic, whether it was learning new tools so that we could keep working remotely, like this show that we're on, whether it was ways to stay engaged, whether it is conversations about contact tracing. There's so much to talk about, but sort of anything that's not related to this has felt somewhat irrelevant. But I do think that there's something really valuable about shifting the messaging now, and that it can't just be about statistics, but that there's a strong desire for conversations about recovery, messages about recovery. And it's not that it all has to be good news. It can be it's naturally not going to be all good news. But I think looking 3 months down the road or 6 months down the road, there's been this relentless onslaught of real-time information, and something to help us look forward to understand what we're moving into, I think is welcome now at this sort of, we're starting to get to a turning point.
We will do that 3 or 6 month look down the road in just a moment. But first, Dana, I want to follow up with you because you study the impact of media exposure on, I guess, what you call collective traumas. What does that entail? And tell us about what you found.
Yeah, so I study, I didn't start off as a researcher on the media. So I'm a trauma psychologist. I'm a stress and coping researcher. So, originally I got in this field, I was interested in how people respond to large scale events that impact the population broadly. Hurricanes, earthquakes, terrorist attacks, public health crises. And over again in all of our studies, we just found this really robust link, even controlling for direct exposure, if people knew someone at the event, if they were at the event. Almost always we find this very robust link between the amount of media exposure that people consume and their mental health, with the increasing media exposure being linked with worse mental health outcomes. And we've also found that linked with downstream effects on people's physical health. So, it really has to do with this amount of exposure. We've also found that exposure to graphic images or images about death, dying, blood, those types of things also tend to portend worse responses over time.
Gordon, the answer to this next question may be obvious, but I don't want to make any assumptions, so let me put it to you. What sorts of professions and or personalities could be at the greatest risk for developing mental health problems as a result of what we're experiencing now?
Well, certainly the first focus has to be the frontline workers who are exposed to such great work schedules and trauma in terms of dealing with loss and their own personal safety concerns. So that's, and of course, that's got a fair amount of focus. And within there, we've discussed the role for people who are perfectionists, who many of these people are perfectionists. So this is one personality style that is totally ill-suited to the pressures and the stress and this unique situation. These are people who like certainty rather than uncertainty, control rather than lack of control. And then you throw in the personal safety concerns. And we know from other research that perfectionists are not only prone to health and mental health problems, but also health problems related to that constant stress that perfectionism puts on them. So that's one personality style. Many occupations I've found that, whether you're actually able to continue to work, that's a key factor, but some people are also tending towards workaholism as well. But generally speaking, we know that some people are better at adapting than others. There's a personality measure of adaptability, and those who already had problems with adaptability are going to find this a potentially very overwhelming situation. And if there's pre-existing problems with anxiety and depression, that's going to be something, it's almost like a double jeopardy situation in terms of now there's the added stress that will further trigger those feelings and the thoughts that keep those problems with anxiety and depression going.
Well, let's find out if university professors who teach media studies are part of that group that we ought to be concerned about. Ramona, I don't want to get too personal with you here, but I mean, you're living this 24/7, both professionally and personally. Okay, let me ask, how are you making out?
I feel like I'm a little bit better these days than earlier on in the pandemic. And I think it's just a matter of in some ways, finding a pattern, finding some regularity. And I'll admit, I have a toddler at home. And while it's a lot to juggle, we have a very, very busy household. There's always activity. But I know through conversations, whether it's people in the media who, I'll check in with colleagues who are talking about sort of the emotional roller coaster every single day, no matter what age you are, no matter your demographic, the sort of collateral of COVID has been our mental health. There's no one who's immune to it. And it is either, the concern, the grief, the loneliness, the sort of grief, not just for someone who you might know who would have been exposed, but for a way of life that we may have left behind at this moment. And then the anxiety and the worry. And so I think, we start our phone calls. Yes, there's the media side of this and media consumption. But when we talk about interfacing with the world through screens right now, we're also having, a day of back-to-back Zoom meetings. And so there's this layer of Zoom fatigue that people talk about on top of it. And even when I, have had conversations about that, about sort of the burnout of these conversations where we are a step removed from each other, even though we're staying in touch with each other, I think people are welcome to just hear that other people are feeling the same thing, that they're maybe feeling that exhaustion on top of it. And so there is a fascinating dynamic in that, this is unprecedented in that we are all experiencing this around the world. We are all going through this. And yet, in some ways, we're not talking about the granular personal experience. We start our Zoom calls or our phone calls with the question, how are you? And I think in some ways we say it out of habit, but I also think we say it out of genuine concern, but we don't have the time off the start of a meeting to really get into it. But more so, I don't think we have the language, we don't have the infrastructure. So there is this toll that it's taking on absolutely everybody.
Dana, I think, a lot of people go into journalism because they want that front row seat on history, and that they are able to maintain, a certain intellectual and emotional distance from what they're covering, particularly if what they're covering is traumatic most of the time. What are you finding about how journalists, reporters, presenters, et cetera, how they're managing right now?
Yeah, so that's a little bit outside my personal area of expertise, although we did have a grad student who was a Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist before she came back to get her PhD. And she was very interested in this kind of phenomenon as well, because from her experience and her research, she actually found that journalists who were covering war specifically had a lot of distress, and they would have symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And even according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, if you are covering these types of events and you're exposed to this information through this vicarious traumatization, we know that can actually elicit symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder as well. So I do think those folks are at a greater risk, according to the research.
Gordon, let me ask you, since you raised it a moment ago, about healthcare workers, and I'm not sure there was a more shocking moment, and there have been plenty over the past couple of months, but I'm not sure there was a more shocking moment than the discovery of that New York doctor who contracted COVID, passed through it, got healthy, was inundated by obviously the enormity of the situation facing her, and ultimately was lost to suicide. What do you think can be done to reduce the risks of more of that happening?
Well, I think first of all, people have to be very strongly encouraged to reach out, but people naturally just have to reach out to them. Whenever we hear about this is again something that triggers the ideas of perfectionism because of the link that's there between perfectionism and increased suicidality. And what we know from such individuals, and what seems to be the situation with this sad case as well in terms of the loss, was that this was where nobody saw it coming. People tend to hide their shame, hide their feelings. There's a lot of self-stigma that goes on. So what we've been advocating is to reach out right from the beginning to encourage that help seeking, but don't wait for somebody to seek help. Ask them how they're doing. And this goes back to a project that I was involved with a local Toronto area school board funded by the provincial government to try to build resilience among children and teach them about becoming a self-advocate, because people tend to just keep that front on until we find out too late often that they were suffering. And then we're struck by the enormous loss of potential and capability. And often these people have so many friends and people in their lives who would have loved to be able to try to help them and get them through, but they put on that front. And we really need to be proactive. And that includes training for resilience starting very early in school. I think we need a bigger focus on life lessons rather than book lessons in terms of what really needs to happen to pull you through a unique situation like this.
Ramona, perhaps you could pick up the story. I mean, we all know this expression, if it bleeds, it leads, which is a particularly, I think it's fair to say, American local news phenomenon. But how do we find the balance between wanting to share accurate, helpful, even if it's stark, information, not wanting to inundate and overload viewers, listeners, readers with that information, while at the same time kind of trying to preserve everybody's sanity at the same time? Is that too tall an order?
It is a tall order, and I think especially so as we've been talking about, because it's not like anyone is outside of this just watching as an observer, as a member of the media. Everyone's living this in real time as well. I think a lot of it has to do with context and contextualizing information. I think that's what people are really searching for right now. And what I mean by that is, we can't handle this in a different way. We do need to know the statistics of how, the new infection rate, of the death rate. It gives us information about where we're at in this, because we are progressing through something that is sort of a changing, amorphous, moving target. But what's helpful right now, and I think what's needed is, so what does that all mean? What do these numbers mean in terms of our progress? Where are we at in this? What does this mean in terms of reopening? What does reopening mean? How do we do it in a way that, maybe lessens anxiety instead of it leaves people with more questions? I think there are so many of those questions. And so this is really where being mindful of the individual, being mindful that this is a situation where it's not just statistics, but that every single person has a lived experience through this, and that the stories around it really need to be stories about the individual and their survival and their well-being and how they're going to fare throughout this. So whether it's tied to small businesses, whether it's tied to our food supply chain, whether it's tied to the school year, and whether it's going to go through the summer, what's going to happen in the fall, in post-secondary schools. What do you do with people who are planning to go into residence? And there's so many unknowns. So to be able to tie those statistics to that context of a personal experience, whether it's your personal experience or someone else's, I think it just grounds this information in a way that's very helpful right now, and maybe reduces some of that anxiety, some of those unknowns.
Well, Gordon, let me follow up with this, because it seems to me that if you're either working from home or if you've lost your job because of this pandemic and are required to be at home, it seems to me there's two different buckets of people. There are those who have little kids, and there are those who don't. And for those who are trying to get through this, either working or not, with little kids at home, they are learning that this is a very brave and difficult new world. What advice might you have for them as it relates to maintaining your mental health and getting through all of this at the same time?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Steve, because in terms of the daily routines, I mean, yesterday was Mother's Day. It was probably the strangest Mother's Day that we've ever had in recent memory. And I was thinking about, it's a day for celebrating mothers. We got to also celebrate fathers later in June. But I know some of our faculty members at York University. I'm the director of the Lamar Center, and I was chatting with a few of them earlier last week, and they have 3 kids, 5 kids, trying to also finish their grading. And at the sense of this, though, is that sense of you want to live up to some expectation or standard. So now is a time, if you've never done it before, now is a time to try to be self-compassionate, to say that good enough is good enough. One of the lines of research I do is on mattering. And what kids want to know is they want to know that everything's going to be okay and that they matter to the people who matter to them. And just focusing on that rather than worrying about living up to expectations for online learning and distance learning is a critical element, because it's that social bond that will be the thing that the kids remember. But parents are far too good at beating themselves up according to this impossible standard. You hear about the perfect mother syndrome, for instance, and nobody actually has ever met that perfect mother yet, but people still try to be that person.
Dana, we talk about upstream and downstream problems, and for a moment, let's look downstream, because there are going to be lots of downstream problems created by this pandemic.
Yeah.
You want to make a bit of a list for us as to what you see happening?
Yeah, it's hard to have a crystal ball. I think that, we know from prior research that, when we think about collective trauma, we think about the event itself, right? So you're exposed. If you know somebody that's sick with COVID, you're exposed through the media, and you have those type of exposures. But particularly with this event we have a lot of what we call secondary stressors. And when we talk about stressors, those are things that the pandemic is kind of causing, such as job loss, decreased wages, this stress of having your children home. Some people are at home in very undesirable environments, like in abusive homes, low resource, food insecure. So, some of those problems are going to be increasing, and, they might not recover quite so quickly from that. So I think that we're going to be seeing the effects of the pandemic, as well as this kind of contextual sequence and cascade of negative life events. Particularly with the media exposure, we know that kind of this immediate activation of the sympathetic nervous system, or kind of the fight or flight response, when that stays activated chronically, that can actually have those negative downstream effects on your physical health as well. We've even seen this kind of media exposure linked to increase in cardiovascular disease years later. So I do really think it's important for people to find ways to reduce their stress, to find calm in this however they can, and to really take care of themselves in terms of trying to regulate that activation of the fight or flight response, even during this very stressful time.
Well, Ramona, you might have an idea in that regard. What's the Creative Community Project all about?
Well, it's so interesting to hear. We've been talking about the messages and the stories and the individual and the contextual. And I think there's a certain element of empowerment in all this. So the Communities Create project came about really from everything we've been talking about, this unshakable feeling that we needed to address the mental health toll of COVID-19, the anxiety, the grief, the loneliness, that everyone is going through this in some way. And so what the initiative is, we've put together a consortium of really some of the country's top media and arts organizations. It's really been amazing to see the uptake of this and the collaboration of organizations ranging from Ryerson, where I am, where this started out, but also a number of different schools across Ontario, Sheridan, OCAD, the Canadian Film Centre, but also at the NFB, the National Film Board, Second City, there's Artscape, all these great organizations. And what we're doing is holding free online workshops every week. They're interactive. So if you know Peloton, it's sort of Peloton meets Art Attack in that it's live and you're with everybody and you can engage with these leading artists. The goal was to be able to support the creative community. So to be able to provide micro grants to independent artists or creators so that they could lead these workshops. But then the workshops are for everyone. And the umbrella question is, how are you feeling right now? And again, from dealing with mental health professionals who are working with us and crisis response, the input we really got was that it had to be right now. It couldn't be just how are you feeling, because again, it's so overwhelming and we're feeling so many different ways. To be very colloquial, we're feeling all the feels every single day. But to have these tools to be able to start expressing how we're feeling, whether it's Second City doing a workshop, which is next week, on dealing with anxiety and grief through comedy as a tool for resilience, or whether it's photography as a means of being able to share how you're feeling when, finding the words is just too difficult. So the hope is that throughout all this, not only is there sort of an element of emotional solidarity, when you look at Wikipedia, a small percentage, something like 1% of Wikipedia engagement is actually creating those articles. And everyone else is just using the articles, engaging with that content, but we don't think any less of that experience. So for everyone else who's just watching the content that gets created, I think there is this element of understanding, of relief that they see that other people are going through the same thing. And then that hopefully, not only is it a means for people to be able to express themselves and express how they're feeling, but that throughout all this, we can put together a time capsule of how we've fared in this historic and unprecedented time.
Gordon, let's finish up on this. And I want to use my moderator's prerogative here, I guess, to get some advice for myself, if you don't mind.
Sure, you're the man, so go ahead.
Well, there are some pretty significant ways in which I keep my sanity at normal times. And one is to play hockey once a week when the weather's a little cooler. And then when the weather gets better, I play baseball once a week. And during baseball season, I watch about 150 games a year. I can't do any of that right now. So what do you suggest?
I know exactly how you feel, Steve. I'm still waiting for the Leafs to win that cup and been watching sports since age of 6 and just still waiting. And baseball is a big thing for me as well. How many times can I watch The Natural or Field of Dreams and say, I think I know how this story ends? I found it's very helpful to find podcasts that you hear people talking, usually ones where there's an optimistic element, not podcasts about how to find out more about COVID-19, just to hear stories of resilience. There's some sports podcasts out there for the sports fan like me that's desperate to hear something, some old news. Occasionally it's okay to watch old replays. I got to say this for the Raptor fans out there, that tomorrow is the anniversary of Kawhi's shot, and I can never watch that enough times. But, this is a key thing. We synchronize our lives according to this. And the reason why I think there's a lot more depression out there is because depression, the hallmark symptom, is the loss of things that are usually pleasurable and fun. But I also want to say to people, keep the faith. These things are coming back. We know that this is going to end. And it's a totally different experience if you can maintain a sense of hope and optimism And that includes some of the things that Ramona was talking about in terms of things you can do that make you feel better, that give you a plan, so that it's not just wishful thinking or, Pollyanna type stuff, but you actually can see something you can do to make yourself and others feel better.
Well, as they say, from your lips to God's ears. Gordon Flett from York University, Dana Rose Garfin from the University of California, Irvine, Ramona Pringle from Ryerson University. Really good of all of you to spend so much time with us on TVO tonight. Be safe, be well, and thanks very much.
Thank you,
Great,
Steve.
thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.